Welcome to the RevOps Lab, a podcast exploring the art and science of revenue operations. To find more episodes and resources on scaling your revenue engine, visit getweflow.com/RevOps.
Hey, Philip.
Hey, Anis. So, what's going on in today's episode?
Yeah, today we're talking to Charlie Saunders on how to track funnel metrics across the entire marketing and sales funnel. Charlie shares many valuable lessons on funnel metrics he's gathered since founding CS2 8 years ago with his wife. Enjoy. Super excited to have you.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah. Would you mind giving the audience a quick background about yourself? I mean, I know you're quite experienced, so super curious, about that.
Of course. Yeah. So like you said, I'm Charlie Saunders, co-founder and CRO of CS2. We're a marketing and revenue operations consulting agency. We've been around since 2015 now. So coming up on our 10th year. Prior to that, I worked at a couple of technology companies, Epicor and Jive, primarily in demand gen marketing ops roles earlier on in my career. Started CS2, like I said, back in 2015 with my co-founder Chrissy, and have been running the company now, like I said, for almost 10 years. And we only really work with B2B SaaS companies during their stages of growth through generally like Series A all the way through to IPO. Most of our companies there are pre-IPO, going through those crazy growth stages the B2B SaaS companies go through, trying to scale, growing their teams, trying to implement tools, or trying to implement what we would call revenue growth architecture, and just really helping them on an ongoing basis to mature everything they're doing from an operations standpoint. So excited to be here and talk about some of the stuff that we work on with our clients.
Yeah, so I mean, it's great to have you, and we got so many positive recommendations about you guys, so we wanted to have you on the show. I mean, super curious about what you typically work on with your customers. Are there specific areas that you mostly cover?
Yeah, so really we break down our services into a few different categories. So the first one is actually what we're going to be talking about today. It's all around funnel architecture. So how are you capturing demand? How are you built out your sales stages? How are you tracking all of those stages from demand capture to revenue and customer expansion, and all of the analytics and all of the decision making that can go into that once you have the right architecture and business process around your funnel. We also help our clients with campaigns. This is where we get a bit more into multi-touch attribution, campaign operations. How are you actually delivering on all of the campaigns that you're working on? The third category is all around the tech stack. So we're pretty tech agnostic at CS2. So we help our clients across the board. When it comes to marketing automation, most of our clients are on HubSpot or Marketo, although we do have Pardot. Salesforce as CRM is one of the areas that we're least tech agnostic. So all of our clients have Salesforce, but then we help our clients implement the rest of their tech stack. So whether that's ABM tools, data tools, chat tools, analytics tools, and everything in between. So we have a really experienced and really great team that helps our clients day to day on all of these projects. And then the last category is all around analytics. So once you've got the infrastructure, once we've built out everything you need from a tech stack, tracking point of view, then the job is how do we analyze this data and make the best decisions? So that's generally the four primary areas that we help our clients with.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, we'd love to dive really into funnel metrics today, because I think that's an area we spend a lot of time and that is fundamentally broken. So yeah, I mean, if you could maybe give a quick intro and what is funnel metrics for you and what matters there?
Yeah, so funnel metrics, the way that we think about it is really how are you capturing demand? So whether that is through someone coming in through a demo request, an event, any of the typical sources that you can imagine that is a tipping point. And we always talk about tipping point being the model for our funnel, where it is now time for sales to engage. So someone fills out a demo form, maybe they've scored up to an MQL, maybe they've gone to an event, now sales engages, or sales has gone outbound. That's what we would typically say is the beginning of the funnel at that tipping point. And then all of the operations and architecture that you had around that sales handoff process. So how are you getting sales to follow up? That could be, syncing the data to Salesforce, using a tool like Lean Data for routing, then even maybe getting the data into a sales engagement platform for follow up, and then tracking and having a really repeatable and solid business process all the way through the sales stages, both pre-opportunity sales stages, so moving into sales working, maybe your meeting book stage, and then all the way through opportunity stages to closed one. And that is the funnel, right? It's the marketing and sales shared funnel of creating demand and then turning that demand into customers. And then there's going to be, upsell, expansion funnels. And there's a couple of aspects that you need, and we can dive more into this, but the TLDR is the good business process, a good setup of your technology to have a repeatable and efficient process, and then tracking the milestones and the stages along the way. So then you can get the analytics that you need for your funnel metrics to then improve that business process and make it the most efficient. So that's generally how we think about funnel.
Yeah. And if you think about tracking, I mean, what are some of the pitfalls you see, customers going into?
Yeah. So tracking the funnel, I mean, there's a lot. So
where to start?
Yeah. So I think that a lot of it does come down to the data model that you're using. So, and there's kind of a long arc to this. So when we first started CS2 and even prior, kind of what people were doing when they were trying to operationalize this and then track everything is they were using, you would say Marketo, because that was our primary marketing automation platform that we were helping our clients with back then. And they were using Marketo to essentially every time a lead or a contact moved through different stages, Marketo would stamp a date stamp on leads and contacts. So the data all the data that you had was on leads and contacts. And then you might have a lead source field on the leads and contacts to then say, okay, this lead came from this event and we're tracking those date stamps. But then over the years, people have just kept on bumping up against issues with their data model. Because when you think about the funnel, although when you look at a picture of a funnel, it looks kind of linear and they just go through these steps, but that's not actually how things work in practice, right?
Yeah.
So there's several issues, and maybe I could go through just the names of them and we could dig into them. But one of the first ones is, what happens if they're not ready yet? The person isn't ready. So sales starts engaging, they then add them, they recycle them, and then maybe 6 months later they come back again. Because the data model that you're using, you're tracking the date stamps on the lead and contact, you have to overwrite those date stamps. You might have an original MQL date, original meeting date, etc., and then a latest. But then what happens if it happens 3 times? You've missed the middle one. So we kept on having clients come back to us back in the early days, and they'll be like, "Oh, I'm looking at this month-over-month report. We had 1,000 MQLs and 500 meetings or whatever in Q1. When I got to Q4, those numbers were reduced in Q1 now because that meeting or that MQL has just been moved to Q4 in that reporting because you're basing it on maybe latest MQL date. So that's one of the issues. And then the other side of this, and maybe I'll focus on these 2 issues, I think they're very related based on the lead and contact stuff, is in Salesforce, as everyone knows, you have leads and you have contacts. And when you're trying to get a full funnel, you're trying to look at, okay, what are my conversion rates through all of these stages? You're having to pull a lead report. You're having to pull a contact report. Also, based on some people maybe not getting enough information onto lead and contact, you're maybe having to also pull a campaign report, campaign member report. You're then having to get an opportunity report. You might want some other account data, get an account report. And then you're getting all of that data, you're putting it into an Excel file to try and marry it all up and connect it to then get your full funnel metrics. And 1, that's terribly inefficient. 2, it's often wrong because the way that you're pulling all that data and then trying to match it up is just very imperfect. So you end up with this situation with this old model where you're overwriting data retention issues, and then you have this massive cluster of a process that's inefficient and pretty broken to actually get an idea of how your business is working. So there comes a couple of the big ones there that I'll start with.
Yeah, really big ones, I think. Curious, right? So CRM typically, the way we certainly at Weflow talk about Salesforce is, you kind of want to treat your CRM as a system of truth, like a one source system of truth, ideally. But is that from your experience, particularly when it comes to attribution and the whole lead contact topic, is that even like a good idea from your point of view? I mean, I think kind of like makes sense to separate there, maybe like left side of the funnel, sort of like, we kind of like try to get the leads in and try to convert them into meetings, and then sort of like the other part of the funnel where it's then more about like you're in discovery and you go through the stages. And I think it's a much more, I think, clearer process, I would say, easier to attribute. But this first part, does it actually work in the CRM? Can you turn it into like a proper one source of truth?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things to dig into here. So, like the pre-opportunity stages, but maybe once you hand off to sales, right? That definitely, obviously, needs to be in the CRM. Sales are working those leads and contacts, and there's not opportunities. I think these days, like back when we started, people were using like the Marketo modeler and stuff, and trying to do some of the lifecycle reporting in Marketo using like RCE. I'm throwing out random things some people might not even know of these days, because like no one really does it that way anymore. But then you started getting to the point where sales and leadership want to see reports, and you're like, okay, go to this, like try and find this report in Marketo, and everyone wants to actually get that reporting in Salesforce. So over the last 10 years, especially with the companies that we work at, kind of growing B2B SaaS companies, there's been a massive reliance on needing the reporting in Salesforce as a first step. Over the last 5 years, maybe, a lot of companies are delving more into BI. But I think one of the issues that happens with that is that when you start to have a data warehouse and a BI tool, you often try to correct some of these issues with the Salesforce data outside of Salesforce. So, you're doing like joining data tables, you're doing some data manipulation in a data warehouse, and now your BI reports look great. But when your VP of sales goes and tries to replicate that report in Salesforce, it just doesn't work. So then you have this, your source of truth is kind of outside of Salesforce now. I'm kind of a believer more in kind of this distributed truth, where you want your BI data and your Salesforce data to be the same, and you want everything to match. And so it doesn't matter if people are pulling a report in different places, it is the same data, which kind of leads us a little bit onto maybe the better data model for funnel tracking around the custom object that I know we're going to talk about today. Because if you can get your Salesforce data right, then you've got the reporting in Salesforce working great, and then you can just use that object and that table in your BI tool without manipulating it, and then maybe create better reports because the visualizations are better, but you're using the same data. That's why I'm a big believer of get your Salesforce data working really well, and then you can distribute that data to other tools and reporting tools and do whatever you want with it. But when you start to manipulate along the way, that's when we've just seen companies just get massively confused, because everyone comes to that. You've got the marketing person and the salesperson coming to a meeting with a different report, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, I think to your earlier point with regards to just the issue of, how do you actually update the timestamps, right? I mean, it's just a huge issue if you think about it, right? Like, I mean, I know you created this custom object. I mean, how is that solving that specific issue, right?
In terms of updating the date stamps, I mean, it's relying on similar logic. It's just where it's updating the date stamps is different. So obviously, in either option, you want to update the date stamps when that sales milestone, that sales stage has been obtained. So say working stage is going to be triggered off when someone's added to an outreach sequence based on demo requests coming in. You want to know that they've been added to the outreach sequence, or an email's been sent out of outreach, and maybe you're updating an outreach stage in Salesforce, or you're triggering off an activity being created in Salesforce to be able to move to working stage. Or, the meeting book stage is happening when a meeting is actually booked, and maybe that's based on activity in Salesforce, or maybe that's based on a stage 0 opportunity being created in Salesforce. That's often what most of our clients do for meetings. Stage 0 opportunities is like a little side thing, but either way, like the logic for saying we've met the stage is the same, but where updating the date stamps would be different. So the lead in contact model is you update the date stamps on the lead in contact, but then because it's one record, every time they re-MQL and go through the funnel and come back round, you're overwriting the data, and then you have the lead and contact issue. But with the custom object, you're creating a whole new object, so a different data table, where you can relate records to leads and contacts, but you can have you can have a one-to-many relationship between funnel records and the lead and contact. So if the lead comes through, gets recycled, say the MQL, they get recycled, that is one funnel record, and then they MQL again, or sales goes outbound, you just create another record in that table and relate it to the same lead and contact. So you can see every journey through the funnel as a separate record, and you're not having any of those data issues with retention. And then you're using just that report type. You're using that custom object report type to do all of your reporting. You're not having to do like lead report, contact report, opportunity report, all these reports and trying to stitch it together outside of Salesforce.
So if I understand you correctly, you essentially create a custom object that's probably kind of a package. You can just easily install it. And then like whatever objects you work in, whether it's leads, contacts, opportunities, it automatically writes essentially many relationships into that custom object, which essentially is almost like a date tracker without creating duplication, right? Which is always a fun issue to deal with. And that custom object is that then used for like reporting purposes. I mean, to Philip's earlier point, right, to continue have the system of truth and use Salesforce as your heart. Would you say then basically this is really almost like a new data model that can be used in Salesforce reporting, but then can also be exported into any BI system and be looked at, and becomes kind of the heart and the heart, or how do you describe it? And did I get that right?
You got that right. Yeah. So I mean, the custom object is an object for reporting, right? Your sales aren't like updating anything manually on that object. They're not like, there's no like kind of operations around that object. It's just as the leads and contacts go through the funnel, as the opportunity gets created and goes through the sales stages and closed won, we're using all of those triggers and updating the day stamps, and also pulling other things, like we're relating that the record to the opportunity, so we can get all the opportunity fields on the custom object. We can get any of the lead and contact fields. So when the tipping point occurs, we're also stamping all of the marketing activities. So we have this concept of the where and the what. So where did the person come from and what did they do? So maybe they came from a paid ad and they did the demo request. That would be updated on the lead and contact. But then when we're creating that custom object record, you are then also stamped that in the custom object record. So then you see, okay, this funnel journey started with a demo request from a paid ad. These are all the sales progression stages and date stamps. It then turned into an opportunity. Here's all the opportunity data. You also have account data on there, this is great for the customer side, because you can stamp the account type. So you could see this is a prospect funnel or a customer funnel, if you had a concept of like a customer MQL or something like that. But then the object, yes, it's a reporting object. It's used to combine all of that data into one table. And then you could use that data for reporting in Salesforce or BI.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's so important. I mean, we're building Weflow, right, a pipeline management forecasting tool, and one of the earliest things we did was to allow cross object fields to be populated in a table, right? Which is a different use case. It's more from a how do you make reps and managers more productive by enabling them to combine data in a different way. So it's not reporting focus; it's really more like workflow focus. But it's a similar idea, right? And I think especially with the rise of data warehouses and BI, being used to drive deeper analytics into what's actually going on, it feels like it's a really really nice addition to the overall stack.
Yeah, without this, I'm pretty bullish on this being the right way to track a funnel. We've tried, there's so many other ways that you could do this. We talked about the lead and contact model. There's some people try and use campaign members, so like try and like add the day stamps to campaign members, which can work. I don't know if people are familiar with Full Circle Insights is a tool that can do that. But then you have the issue of trying to work with a campaign member is a bit more difficult than a custom object. So if you're going to try and build that yourself, it's going to be a bit easier to do on a custom object. But then the other thing is, I think for a use case like this, I don't know if like a subscription for this particular like custom object tracking is required. Like you can set this up. We have an unmanaged Salesforce package that we install for our clients to get this set up. Unmanaged, kind of open source, right? Like it's theirs to use and take on if when they don't work with us anymore. No subscription cost or anything like that. So I think it's a nice middle ground if you're trying to get, advanced funnel tracking to solve some of these issues. You maybe don't have the budget for a tool to do this specific use case, and you have maybe a pretty custom environment where, and it works for custom environments and more simple environments. You have a custom environment where you don't want to have to, build a lot of extra automation around like a managed package. You can kind of just use the unmanaged package and edit it if you do need to account for something custom within your system. And then just when it comes down to the source of truth question, I do believe that even though companies are moving to BI, people still create reports in Salesforce, and I don't see that changing kind of anytime soon. So I just have had so many situations where people are like, why is this report in BI showing like this conversion rate, MQL to pipeline, and I can't replicate this in Salesforce? It's just, once you hear that like 100 times, you go, okay, we should probably have the reporting in Salesforce how we need it and working and a good robust data set, and then we can sync that to BI instead of working with our data team to do some magic outside of Salesforce that we're just never going to be able to replicate in Salesforce. So it really does hit on some of the key problems that we've been working on our clients now for 10 years. So a lot of thought has gone into it for sure.
Curious, in part of this, the whole funnel tracking is of course also to kind of like make a decision on kind of like what sources, what channels actually are worth, doubling down on, or maybe like also discarding at some point if they don't really pay off, don't have good ROI, for instance. Do you use a custom object to also then feed into other custom objects that kind of like are standard signals that you use for funnel tracking? Or is it really like the whole reporting is based on that one custom object then?
You could, I'm sure there's use cases to expand on this for sure. Maybe even some that we haven't even thought of. When it comes to optimizing marketing and sales, I think the key thing to think about with this is that funnel metrics is just one way to measure what you're doing, right? I mean, before we started recording, we were talking about kind of like other forms of attribution. And I think it is worth mentioning there are other ways to measure marketing and sales, multi-touch attribution, self-reported attribution, etc. And funnel metrics is one version. Our point of view is that it's the most important to get right first. So if you're going to do them in order, get this funnel working, because not only is it an analytics project, kind of like we've talked about, it's also figuring out your business process and getting a repeatable business process. So it forces you to go, what should we hand off to sales? What should sales do when something is handed off to them? How do they create meetings? How do we make sure that every step of this process is going to tie all this data together in the right way? Then when it comes to answer your question more on, okay, we're tracking the source of the funnel. So maybe like the example I gave earlier, demo request from a paid ad. You've got to be careful of over optimizing that. I think it's really good to show like, okay, this is where we're capturing demand, and you can look at, we always call it the 3 V's, even though it's not 3 V's, it's conversion, velocity, and volume. Conversion has that strong V in it, so that's why we call it 3 V's, make it easy. Okay. But you're looking at the velocity through the funnel, you're looking at the volume through the funnel, and then you're looking at conversion rate. So I think my favorite way of optimizing is looking at just conversion rate. So you can see, okay, what are our conversion rates between something like content syndication leads versus, demo requests, or looking at the different comparisons there to help you optimize. But you have to know the limitations of that model, because you're tying a very complex sales cycle back to one touch point, because it's the tipping point model. It's what pushed the person into the arms of sales, basically. And there's a lot more touch points on the customer journey that you need to also look at to see if they're somehow influencing the purchasing decision. So I wanted to make sure that's clear, because some people, it's very useful. Our clients make decisions with it every day, but you do need to look at things in a broader picture too, to make sure you're not going to optimize in the wrong way.
Yeah, I think it's so fascinating, because the marketing attribution side and the things you cannot really track and you don't really understand, right? They are there, right? But what you're referring to first and foremost is get the fundamentals you can track, right? And especially between the handover between marketing and sales, I think there's a huge gap in terms of measuring conversion rates, right? It is really challenging. And so if you make that a lot easier, and you can actually look at, first and foremost, get the data model right, get the tracking right, making sure that you understand where there are drop-offs, and then go deep in and try to change them. And then that's probably also very much a topic that's not just data related, but that's also behavior and change management related, right? I'm super curious, like, what are your top learnings with regards to not just tracking the funnel, measuring it and reporting on it, but then actually changing the behavior of the people? Where do you see often like huge potential to drive more revenue?
This is a really good point. Yeah. And that's kind of what I was getting at when I talk about this being an operations project, kind of building out the fundamental kind of what people need to do at each stage, as well as an analytics project. So when it comes to thinking about like one of the most high leverage ways of optimizing this process, a lot of it does come down to the people and the sales team. It's like, what's great about having the custom object and really good data set for this is that you can see, okay, which one of my salespeople are meeting the SLAs? So, okay, we've got like a 10-minute SLA for demo requests. How many, like if you're also tracking your SLA data on the custom object, which you can do, you then see, okay, which salespeople are actually meeting this SLA? Does that impact conversion rates? Which obviously it does. And then you can further maybe enable those salespeople and train them on that process. And then I mentioned kind of the content indication versus demo request. So much of sales and marketing alignment is based on what you're sending to sales. And then are you building trust there that what you're sending to sales, they feel good about it and they want to follow up with those people? Because as soon as you send too much crap, then they just kind of like check out and they don't really do the right activities to engage with those inbound contacts. So then you end up having a double whammy issue where you're sending crap, but then they're also checked out and they're not doing what they need to do, even if it was a good lead. So if you can see those conversion rates, like so often when we're working with our clients, it's very clear. You look at it by channel and you look at it by the offer type, and you go, okay, there's some really underperforming channels here. I don't want to call out any in particular, but then when you see there's like some channels and some conversions that are like converting into pipeline like 50 or more %, and then there's some at like 0.1%, it is a very clear signal on how to improve. And you're not only going to improve kind of the marketing effectiveness, you're going to improve your relationship with sales, because they're going to start trusting, okay, when I do look at my list view and I start to engage with these inbounds, they're good. And then that human behavior element comes in and they start working them harder and they do a better job. And then you start to see both the lift of the improvement of what you're sending, plus that sales effectiveness. They then start working in a better way as well.
Yeah. I mean, so important, right? And so challenging to do. If you just think about this typical MQL, right? Not all MQLs are created equal. And so how do you distinguish those? Do you actually distinguish those by kind of channel as well, and then try to prioritize accordingly, or is that often something that is very effective?
Yeah, so I mentioned the where and what thing earlier. So that when we think about what is being sent to sales, we don't really actually like the acronym MQL, so we use sales ready. So sales ready can mean kind of marketing sales ready. It can mean like a PQL, like they're sales ready in our product. It could mean like a customer is sales ready. It could also mean their sales has gone outbound, like sales had deemed them sales ready. So it's a kind of a catch-all for all of them. But purely focusing on like a marketing sales ready, we always want to capture the where and the what. So the where is where did they come from? So that's like all of your marketing channels. So it could be they came through like organic search, they came through paid search, paid social, an event, etc. And then the what they did is like the what was the conversion that they actually converted on. So that could be your demo request form, your contact us, the specific event that they went to, etc. And if you have those two pieces of the puzzle, then you can see, okay, you can break it down by the where, like all of the channels, or you could break it down by the offers, you could break it down by a combination of the two, and start to really see what has the highest conversion rates and the best velocity through the funnel.
Yeah, that's where the qualified makes a lot of sense. And I really like the sales readiness, because I think marketing qualified leads is just, I mean, I get it, right? But I think it's always a question of definition. And it's often a lot more complicated than this one term, right? So to break it into specific buckets and basically qualify those buckets as sales readiness that are then really attractive and, essentially, ideally end up being, qualified opportunities, right? And then progress in the funnel is something that is, again, I think not something most companies are doing a very good job of, right? And it's hard because the fundamental data model is often not there. So you basically simplify it, and then the simplification creates a real challenge in kind of what you call sales readiness. Not and then sales and marketing not being aligned, because I think of the typical problem we all know, right? Look, I mean, I feel we could continue this, for actually hours. And also, I'd love to maybe find more time to talk about all what we didn't talk about, marketing attribution, which I think is a super fascinating topic. But any other, thoughts or notes on the funnel metrics you haven't shared? I mean, probably many. But yeah, want to ask an open question before we come to our closing question.
I think we touched on all of the main things. I think the thing that maybe is to highlight is it's such a critical element of what companies need that so many companies don't have. Like pretty much every client we work with, the first project is how do we architect your funnel? We have clients coming in, they're spending, $1 million a month on ads, and they don't know if this is working at all. They have no data on the leads coming in through these ads converting into meetings and pipeline and revenue, because this isn't set up. Or maybe someone's tried to do it, but it's just not working. And often the trigger to then working with us is like a new CMO comes into that company and goes, you're spending millions and millions of dollars on marketing. Is anything working? And everyone goes, I don't know. And then they go, okay, we need to get an agency in to help fix this. And maybe we've worked with our CMO before and they bring us in. So what I really want to try and get across when I'm speaking to people is that it's better to invest in this stuff earlier. So there's like this weird dynamic that's so frustrating where companies don't feel the pain of this until it's sometimes not too late, but it's getting to the point of where it's late. So they get to that point where, they're spending millions of dollars on ads. Their new CMO comes in, wants to optimize the business and see what's working, and they can't tell the CMO how it's working. That is not the time to invest in funnel architecture. You should have done it 2-3 years before that. Because if you had started it 2-3 years ago, that new CMO is going to have 2-3 years of data to then base everything off. When you start it today, your data tracking starts today. So you want to do quarter over quarter reporting, you're going to have to wait 6 months from the launch day. If you want to do year over year reporting, you're going to have to wait a year or two to be able to get reporting. So it is something to invest in early, but I don't know how to crack that perfectly because so many companies don't want to put the time and effort in early enough. And then until they're having the acute pain, which is frustrating. But the more I can talk about it, the more we try and get that out there. Hopefully someone might listen, but it does feel like most companies seem to make that mistake over and over again.
Yeah. I mean, look, I hope that people listen to this and, think about it early. I can only subscribe to what you said. And I think one thing is the tracking and reporting. The other thing is the behavior, right? Like improving the metrics, not just tracking them, but really changing the outcome. And I think that's what, go-to-market is all about. And, I really love this, these insights. Thanks for sharing those. Super, super insightful. Curious, you've been around the block for a while. If you were to start in your career new, what would you do differently? What were some of the major learnings so far? Yeah?
What I do differently, that might be a hard one, because I think it all kind of worked out in the end. It's kind of hard to, I think one of the things that I learned early on, I remember one of my, he wasn't my boss, but he was the head of sales for our region when I was working in England. And he gave me some advice. He was just like, you're pretty good at this, meaning I was doing some stuff in Marketo and some of the ops stuff earlier in my career. He's like, you should just get really, really good at this stuff, and then this is going to be really valuable. And I don't remember reflecting on it too much back then, but I think about it a lot now, where that's kind of what happened. And now, I run a whole business. The definition of this has got broader, as the whole industry has matured and we've kind of taken on more and more. But I think just really focusing, so nowadays, I think people are getting into operations roles more explicitly, they're thinking about it and they're getting into it. Especially when I started, you kind of just accidentally fell into it, and you were just the demand gen person playing around in Marketo. Before you know it, everyone's asking you Marketo stuff and then Salesforce stuff, and then you're just kind of that person. But I think the earlier you can make that commitment to being in revenue operations and just really doubling down, working on your technical skills, working on the strategic skills, how to prioritize, how the business operates, how to optimize, analytics, and just really harness those early and be very kind of specific about addressing all of those gaps. Also, not getting pigeonholed into one tool. Don't just be the HubSpot person. Don't just be the Marketo person. Really think about this broadly. You're going to do well, because this industry and this role is already in massive demand. Even during the tech issues over the last 18 months, we've still had strong demand. A lot of people in these roles, I know some people did get laid off, but it seems to be a little bit more immune to it than some other roles, because companies this is such a pain for companies. And if you can solve those pains and get really good at it, you're going to be valuable. So just working hard and putting in the time to level up your skill set is, I think, just the timeless advice, and just being very specific about revenue operations, marketing operations, and doubling down there.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's a wrap. Very much enjoyed the episode. Learned a lot about funnel tracking, and definitely curious about trying out the custom object approach myself in our own Salesforce setup. So I'm definitely going to explore this over the weekend. So thank you for the inspiration. And and talk to you soon, hopefully.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you very much for listening to this episode of the RevOps Lab podcast. Please consider to like and subscribe our show and give us a 5-star rating on wherever you're listening. If you have feedback or suggestions, let us know at podcast@getweflow.com. We read and reply to every email. Thank you.